Chapter 256, Rage and Sorrow. Beiki entered the Wind Daimyo's office. It was a large circular room with a circular table at the center of the room. The daimyo was sitting on the chair exactly opposite Beiki's location. Beiki bowed respectfully and said, "Greetings, Lord Daimyo. Lord Kazekage wanted to send you a message." He handed a scroll to the daimyo. The daimyo didn't speak a word and took the scroll and began reading. The scroll expressed condolences on the recent deaths. It also mentioned that Raza speculated that these attacks were done by Kanahagakuer or Iwagakuer. Beiki said, "Lord Kazekage heard about the recent assassinations and was concerned about the safety of everyone in the Wind Capital. He sent me here to investigate the assassinations and increase the safety of the Wind Capital." Neither Beiki nor the scroll mentioned anything about clearing Suna's name. No words were needed for that. The daimyo replied while watching Beiki carefully, "The recent events have alarmed me. So I have reached a deal with the Land of Iron to send 200 more samurais here. Unfortunately, I don't have any access budget for it. So it will have to come out of the budget assigned to Tsunagakuer." Beiki frowned. He said, "Lord Dai." However, he was cut off by the Wind Daimyo, who said, "Save your breath. My meetings today were all about this matter. All my advisors and ministers have agreed upon it. I will send an official letter to Raza soon." Beiki knew that speaking any more would be pointless. He turned around and said, "All right. I will start investigating the assassinations." He left without bidding any farewells. The daimyo saw him leave and let out a sigh while thinking, "These warmongers keep getting more and more power hungry. I had advised them against starting the Third Great Ninja War. But they completely ignored me and started it without my knowledge or permission. In the end, they lost so badly that they were forced into an alliance with Konoha. Even then, they still haven't learned their lessons." The daimyo snorted and decided, if they want to continue being arrogant, so be it. He looked at Hajime and said, "Send that letter to Mifune." Hajime nodded and left the room. After leaving, Beiki's mood was terrible. He could see that the daimyo was intent on making Suna pay for the recent assassinations. He muttered, "At this rate, Lord Raza might decide to kill him instead of trying to come to terms with him." He met with the other 19 ninjas. Soon they began investigating the deaths. After inspecting all the dead bodies, Beiki concluded numerous clues. He analyzed, all 15 bodies have very similar injuries. It's as if the same person has killed them. Or at the very least, all of them were probably trained by the same master. The wounds are definitely from wind blades. But the same effect could also be achieved by the wind sword jutsu. So it is likely that Tenjinins had attacked instead of the speculated Tenjounins. This alone should be enough to get rid of most of the suspicions from us. But Beiki frowned as he recalled his conversation with the Wind Daimyo and Hajime's attitude. He thought, unfortunately, the daimyo seems to be intent on making us pay. He won't pay any attention to this matter unless he has no other choice. In fact, even if we catch the culprits, he might still think that it is us framing someone else. Suddenly, Beiki had an idea. He realized, the only way to completely remove all suspicions would be to catch the culprits in the city and fight them openly. As long as they use wind jutsus, no one will be able to blame Suna. The only issue here is that the fighting in the city could cause a lot of damage to the city. Beiki's expression hardened as he decided, but, seeing how the daimyo treated us, I don't need to be concerned about such damages. As long as the culprits are from Iwa or Konoha, the daimyo will have no choice but to readjust the budgets and closely align himself back with us. Now, I just hope that those cowards haven't run away. The cowards, who Beiki had referred to, was sitting in one of the restaurants where he could occasionally notice the Tsunagakure ninjas. Numerous thoughts were running through his mind and numerous plans were being created. Fujin heard all the talks happening in the restaurant and outside. He thought, so 20 people were sent here just for me, huh? Looks like they didn't suspect shadow clones. And their leader is Beiki. A smirk formed on Fujin's face. Still, this is making it so easier for me. I have already seen 6 faces other than Beiki. The next time, I will transform into them, ha ha ha. I wonder what Raza's thoughts would be if he received a message that the very ninjas he sent to investigate were being accused of murder. For the next couple of weeks, Beiki and his squad searched the entire Wind capital to find the culprits. Unfortunately, they didn't find anyone. In these 2 weeks, no new incident occurred. The Wind Daimyo and Hajime became more and more certain that the assassinations were carried out by the Tsunagakure. Hajime wondered, couldn't Suna come up with a better scheme? First they kill nobles and samurais here and then they put up a charade of trying to desperately look for the culprit. Next, they will say that they haven't found any culprit and hence will station some troops here permanently for protection. Even a child could see through this scheme. As Hajime predicted, after 2 weeks of desperately looking for the culprits, Beiki stopped. He and his unit decided to stay there to stop the next wave of attacks. Another week and a half passed by peacefully. Most of the common citizens had begun forgetting about the incident earlier and moved on with their lives. Even the Suna ninjas and the samurai had stopped maintaining full alertness. In one of the numerous mansions in the Wind capital, a teenage girl was watering plants in her room while singing merrily. Suddenly, she felt a pain in the back of her neck. Instantly, she lost consciousness and began falling down. However, a hand held her and stopped her from falling to the ground. At the same time, the door of the room opened. A middle-aged man walked in saying, "Kahei, how many times should I te? Who are you?" The man suddenly became stunned to see his daughter lying unconscious in the arms of an unknown Suna ninja. Memories of the 10 assassinations surfaced in his mind. He was about to yell when the Suna ninja suddenly appeared in front of him and grabbed his mouth and said, "Scream and both you and your daughter will die." The man felt an intense bloodlust from the ninja. Without letting the man speak, the ninja said, "Did you think that you could double-cross us by forming a secret deal with a Megakure?" The man's eyes widened. The ninja was amused as well. He thought, "I just made up a lie. To think that it would be true." The man wanted to scream that his deal with the Megakure wasn't harmful to Tsunagakure in any way. On the contrary, it might benefit Tsunagakure in the long term. However, he could not speak. The ninja was still grabbing his mouth so tightly that his cheeks had begun bleeding. The ninja said, "As this is just your first offense, I will only take the life of your daughter." The man's eyes widened. He began struggling, but he was no match for the ninja. The ninja continued, "If you continue to betray us, or if you tell anyone about this interaction, then you and your family will be eliminated." The ninja grabbed the neck of the unconscious girl and strangled her till it popped. The man struggled helplessly, but he could only see his daughter die in front of his eyes. Tears rolled down his eyes. The ninja tossed the man away and disappeared. Rage and sorrow were visible in the man's eyes. He screamed, "Kahei!" His screams alerted the entire mansion. Immediately a samurai and a few others came running. They saw their lord sobbing with the dead body of his daughter in his arms. Her mother saw her dead daughter and began crying in disbelief and pain as well. She cried, "Who did this, Kojiro?" Kojiro's eyes reddened. He said hatefully, "Tsunagakure. I will never forgive them." He looked at the samurai and said, "I want to meet Lord Daimyo. Come with me. But first, call a few more of your comrades to protect my family." The samurai nodded and immediately got to work. After ensuring sufficient protection, Kojiro along with the samurai began moving towards the daimyo's estate. However, he wasn't alone. 11 more nobles were also walking towards the daimyo's estate in rage and sorrow. Chapter 257, Proving Their Innocence. Fujin received all the memories and sighed, "I don't mind killing the greedy nobles. None of them have their hands clean. But killing innocent ones always leaves a bad taste." Though the training in Umbu wasn't as messed up as root training, it still was quite dark. Every new Umbu was made to kill a few innocent people on missions by the Umbu captains. Of course, their deaths would benefit Konoha in some way, but they themselves didn't harm Konoha or anyone else. Hence no one would think that they deserved death. Under normal circumstances, every new Umbu would be made to do this within a month of joining the Umbu. However, since Fujin's group was much younger with ages of just 12 and 13, they were asked to do this on a mission around 6 months after joining and after they had already completed a few missions. Despite not liking it, all three did it. After the first time, the Umbu commander would ensure that every once in a while, the Umbu ninjas would receive a mission that would include killing innocent civilians. It would be asked of them in a very subtle manner. The method was the complete opposite of the route. Eventually, after years of serving in the Umbu ninjas would begin considering this as normal. Fujin, despite his intelligence and knowledge about the Naruto world, didn't notice this subtle scheme. But, to be fair, he wasn't the only one. Every Umbu ninja, including the likes of Kakashi and Itachi, was subtly influenced over the years. However, since Fujin's time in the Umbu wasn't very long, he wasn't influenced to an extreme end and would avoid it if he had the option. Of course, if anyone couldn't do this, they were allowed to leave the Umbu. However, the instances of someone leaving Umbu, for this reason, were very low. The main reason was that Hiruzen would be very careful while selecting ninjas into the Umbu ranks. This was why someone like Might Guy was never invited into the Umbu. Daimyo's estate. 12 nobles accompanied by 12 samurais arrived in Daimyo's office. All reported the assassination angrily and demanded to the Daimyo to take action against Suna ninjas and the village as well. The entire room was in complete chaos. The Wind Daimyo sighed. He wondered, what are these lunatics doing? Do they want to rebel against me? Or is it really someone else who is pushing the blame on them? The Wind Daimyo was confused. At the same time, he was a bit fearful. After all, even though he held the authority, in terms of power, he was no match for the Kazekage. If the Kazekage decided to kill him, it wouldn't matter how many samurais he hired to protect himself. However, he shook his head and concluded, no, if Raza attacks me, then he will have to face retaliation from the other daimyos. Though their cages don't have to listen to them, they will as they could all plunder Tsunagakure together and divide the benefits among themselves. The only fear is if 3 or more kage decided to revolt against their daimyo. In that case, we will be history. However, the other cages haven't shown any such indications yet. So Raza would not dare to make a move against me yet. Though he didn't want to take action, he couldn't let the grievances of the 12 nobles go unanswered. He instructed, call Baki and the other Tsunagakure ninjas. Hajime, increase the defenses of the estate. Hajime nodded and said, it will be done, Lord Daimyo. He immediately got to work. Soon, over 50 samurais arrived at the daimyo's mansion and took positions. Hajime stayed by the Wind daimyo's side. Beiki received the message. He frowned and wondered, what now? Does the daimyo have any problems with us staying here? He gathered all his subordinates and went towards the daimyo's estate. Fujin was sitting in a restaurant near daimyo's estate using Hiroshi's appearance. He noticed the 20 Suna ninjas running towards the estate. He wondered, will they be imprisoned? Or will Beiki manage to convince the daimyo? Sigh, I want to watch their meeting. It'll be fun for sure. Beiki and the rest entered the estate. A frown formed on Beiki's face. The remaining Suna ninjas also became alert. They could see that the number of samurais in the mansion had increased a lot. They walked to Daimyo's office. As soon as they did, the eyes of the nobles widened. Kojiro pointed at one ninja and screamed, it was him. This bastard killed my daughter. I want him dead. The other 11 nobles also screamed at the same time while pointing towards other ninjas. The room became complete chaos once again and was drowned in their screams. The Tsunagakure ninjas were dumbfounded at the accusations. Beiki had a bad feeling. The daimyo commanded, quiet down. Soon, the entire room became quiet. However, the nobles kept looking at the Tsunagakure ninjas with hateful gazes. If looks could have killed, then all Tsunagakure ninjas would have already been dead. Daimyo said, how would you explain this, Beiki? Beiki replied, I have no idea what you or they are talking about, Lord Daimyo. The daimyo frowned. He analyzed, from his expression, it looks like he really doesn't know anything. The faces of others are clueless as well. But, do they really not know anything or are just acting? He said, do you really not know? 12 of your subordinates assassinated family members of these nobles. And you say you have no idea? Has the Kazekage decided to break all ties with me? Beiki's bad feelings increased. He quickly replied, that's impossible. Why will we kill them? He looked at the nobles and identified a few. He added, some of them have a good relationship with our village. We have no reason to destroy our ties with them. Kojiro screamed, you found out about my trade deals with the Megakure. You killed my daughter to make me stop doing that despite that trade deal having no adverse impact on Tsunagakure. Another noble screamed, bastard, I don't even have any trade deals with any other country. Still this lunatic falsely accused me and killed my wife. The Suna ninjas immediately defended themselves and said that they didn't kill anyone. Soon, a verbal argument broke out. However, Beiki was silent. He was sweating as he realized, don't tell me. The previous attackers kept hiding in the city until we dropped our guard down. In the meantime, they must have seen us and decided to disguise themselves as us to kill their next target. Additionally, there were 2 more attackers this time. The previous time, we were only suspected due to the use of the wind jutsu. However, this time, their suspicion will be entirely on us. Due to the rage of losing a loved one, they won't even listen to any explanations. Beiki stopped his subordinates and said, Lord Daimyo, you know that ninjas are able to transform into others. I believe that the culprits of the previous assassinations disguised as us so that our relations will deteriorate further. Kojiro snorted, sure they can transform. But can they replicate their voice as well? Even if they can, how can they replicate his voice so perfectly? Even if someone transformed, it will have to be someone from your group. Beiki was stunned. He muttered to himself, don't tell me that we interrogated all the culprits and still didn't notice them. How else could they replicate our voice? However, Beiki shook his head and said, "We have been very active in the Wind capital recently. It isn't surprising that they could have overheard us." Kojiro's anger kept soaring. He said, Good. So what you mean to say is that you are so incompetent that not only could you find the previous culprits, but instead you allowed them to completely disguise themselves as you. And you call yourself a ninja." This insult angered many of the Tsunagakure ninjas. They immediately argued back and said how competent and capable they were. Kojiro replied while pointing at a ninja, "If that's the case, then my daughter was murdered by none other than him." The Tsunagakure ninjas were left speechless. Though they were much stronger in strength, when it came to debating, they were no match for the nobles who spent all their time scheming for benefits. After all, not every ninja could scheme or argue as well as a Kage could. Beiki stepped in once again and said loudly, "This is a pointless argument. I can assure you that none of my ninjas were involved." He looked at the nobles and said, "One by one, point out the ninjas you saw in your mansions and at what time. I will ask them where they were at that time and we will verify. That will prove that my men are innocent." Before the nobles could say anything, the daimyo nodded, "All right, let's do that." The nobles complained but the daimyo said, "We will first have to know the truth. Your loved ones won't rest in peace if the real murderers roam free while we punish the ones who didn't." Chapter 258, Forcing the Kaze Kage out of Tsunagakure. Since the daimyo had made his decision, the nobles quieted down. Soon, the 12 ninjas whom Fujin impersonated were being questioned. They all stated where and with whom they were and what they were doing. The samurais began verifying all the information and cross-checking it with people who could vouch that they were indeed in those locations. 11 ninjas were around other people and hence they had multiple alibis. However, one ninja was hiding and doing an undercover task. Hence no one noticed him during that time. So despite telling his location, he had no alibi. The locations of the remaining 8 ninjas were also asked as the nobles mentioned that they could have transformed. Even among them, except one, all had good alibis. The Suna ninjas left no stone unturned in order to clear their name. All proof indicated that the Suna ninjas were innocent and were framed. The nobles went quiet. Though 2 ninjas didn't have any alibi, the rest had them. So they weren't sure anymore. However, they didn't want to give up. After all, their loved ones were killed in front of their eyes. If they assumed that someone else was the culprit, then they would never get justice. After all, the killers of the previous incident were still roaming free. No matter how much the families of the dead nobles cried and created a ruckus, they didn't get the justice they deserved. Suddenly, one noble recalled something. He quickly said, "Can't ninjas use clones? What if they stayed there while their clones did their dirty work for them? After all, we can't put up a fight against clones either." Beiki and the Suna ninjas were put under pressure once again. Beiki said, "According to what you described, the ninjas who attacked you had solid bodies. We use wind clones who don't have solid bodies and are easy to be dispelled. If your killers were clones, then they would be shadow clones of Konohagakure or rock clones of Iwagakure. None of us know how to do those clones." Hajime raised his eyebrows. He could counter Beiki's point, but he didn't. As he recalled the scroll he received, "Lord Mifune asked me not to take sides in this matter as long as no one is fighting. Though I don't like how Suna is behaving, I should let it go as it isn't my business." In order to pacify the Land of Iron, Raza had reached a deal privately with them and compensated them appropriately despite not having committed the crime. As a result, Beiki was saved from being pushed further into the corner by Hajime. One of the nobles asked, "How can you prove that you can't create those types of clones?" Beiki was annoyed. He asked, "How can you prove that we do?" The noble didn't back off and replied, "You can't prove that you can't create those types of clones. And 2 of your ninjas were still missing at the moment of the murders. Perhaps these 2 are the only ones who can create those types of clones and hence were missing. So you guys still are the most suspicious ones." Beiki showed an annoyed expression. He argued, "Do you think a ninja can create clones at will? Do you even know how much chakra is needed to create one?" Despite showing an irritated expression, Beiki was relieved. He thought, good. From certainty, they have backed off to just suspicions. They entered another debate which lasted 15 minutes. Finally, the daimyo said, "Enough. You have made your point, Beiki. But you Suna ninjas are still the most suspicious ones. For the time being, I will be placing the 12 ninjas they saw and the missing ninja under arrest. As for the rest, you will be accompanied by samurais at all times." Beiki's expression became ugly. He said, "Lord Daimyo, you can't." However, the daimyo interrupted him and said, "Calm down. They will only be placed under house arrest. And all 13 ninjas will stay together. So you don't need to worry about them being treated unfairly. If you want, you can visit them daily. I'll send a letter to Raza and ask him to come here before this matter explodes beyond the point where we can resolve it." Beiki analyzed for a few seconds and agreed to those terms. He gave some instructions to the 13 ninjas and left the estate with the remaining 6 Suna ninjas. The remaining 13 Suna ninjas were placed in a large room with samurais watching over them. Fujin noticed the 7 ninjas leaving and began analyzing. Only 7 left the estate? Meaning that 13 are still in the estate. But I only impersonated 12 of them. After all, I heard only their voices and have no idea how the rest sounded. Did someone else also try the same tactic coincidentally? What exactly happened inside? Fujin kept analyzing but couldn't be certain. He concluded, since only 7 came out, I am sure that they weren't let go scot-free. But since they seem fine, no conflict should have taken place. Meaning that Beiki and the daimyo came to some agreement. Looks like I will have to wait for information to be released or for rumors to spread. Fujin got up and began leaving. He sighed and muttered to himself, why is everyone so smart? It'd have been so easy if they accepted the events as presented to them and just suspected Tsunagaku blindly. I could have returned to Konoha by now if they did so, and their troubles would also end. Fujin returned to his hotel room and waited patiently. He knew that the next few days would be very tense in the Wind capital. The Wind daimyo soon sent a message to the Kazekage informing him about the recent events and asking him to come to the Wind capital city. At the same time, Beiki also sent a message to Raza informing him of everything that happened in detail. Tsunagaku. Unlike Fujin, who was calmly bidding for time, Raza was absolutely livid. Raza crushed the scroll in his hand and cursed angrily, what the hell? Who does he think he is? However, his advisors quickly said, please calm yourself, Lord Kazekage. We are not in any position to make any move against Lord Daimyo. If something were to happen to him, all other villages would attack us like vultures. Raza calmed down and snorted, I will go and make a visit. You two, come with me. Also, bring our best censors along. The advisors nodded. They began gathering the forces and preparing to leave. Raza was disappointed in Beiki. He wondered, what the hell is Beiki doing? How could he allow things to deteriorate so much under his watch? Are the enemies so good that he is completely helpless? Not knowing the answers, Raza left Tsunagakure along with 2 advisors, 2 censors, and 4 Umbu ninjas. At the same time, 10 squads of Umbu left Tsunagakure and began following Raza's group from a distance. In total, 46 ninjas headed towards the Wind Capital city. Wind Capital. Back in Wind Capital, rumors had begun flying around the city. These were being spread by the 12 nobles who were affected. Once again, the entire city began gossiping. Fujin heard a bunch of rumors as well. However, unlike a normal citizen, he noticed a bunch of inconsistencies. He analyzed, the rumors say that Daimyo has decided to punish the evil Suna ninjas. But I doubt that would be the case. Otherwise, Beiki wouldn't have withdrawn peacefully. I guess the rumors are being spread by those nobles so that the daimyo is forced into taking action. But, why has the daimyo not made any statement? It's almost as if the daimyo wants these rumors to be known all through the city. Unlike Fujin, who was analyzing calmly, Beiki and his subordinates were panicking. Beiki too arrived at the same conclusion as Fujin. However, he had more information than Fujin. He realized, the daimyo isn't crushing these rumors as he wants a public perception to be built against Tsunagakure. This way, when Lord Raza arrives, he will be under a lot of pressure. However, despite noticing daimyo's scheme, Beiki couldn't do anything. After all, he was being watched by samurais at all times. The rumors would continue spreading unrestricted. At the same time, they would be exaggerated to ridiculous extents. However, after some time, all the rumors would be silenced by one piece of news: the 4th Kazekage had arrived at the Wind Capital city. Chapter 259, Trouble Comes. Irrespective of the rumors and politics, the Kazekage was still the leader of Tsunagakure. He was one of the 5 people who stood at the top of the ninja world. As such, he was looked at with awe and reverence throughout the land of wind. Immediately people flocked over to the place the Kazekage was walking through. Most threw the rumors to the back of their minds. However, a few became alert. If the rumors were true, then it could mean trouble. After all, the Kazekage himself had to come to the Wind Capital city to clear up the matter. Raza continued walking through the street slowly. He was followed by 2 advisors and 2 censors. The Umbu had stopped outside the city. As soon as the news of his arrival spread, people began rushing towards him. At first, only a few people were on the side of the street. However, in a few minutes, both sides of the streets were jam-packed. Raza looked at the people surrounding the streets with a smile. He could have hurried through to the daimyo's estate. However, he didn't, as this was a good opportunity to show that he had public support and make the daimyo think twice about alienating him any further. Among the numerous people watching him was Fujin. Unlike his previously relaxed state of mind, he was very tense. He thought, shit. Why the fuck did he show up? Granted, I created a mess, but that shouldn't have been enough to call a cage here, right? Fujin wasn't concerned when Beiki arrived, as he was confident of escaping even if Beiki somehow discovered him. However, if Raza was to find him, Fujin didn't have much confidence in his ability to run away. The resultant fight was sure to give away his identity as well. However, despite being tense, Fujin wasn't panicking, as he knew, he won't go around looking for the culprits. That would be unbecoming of a cage. I just have to avoid making any moves while he is in the city. His expression hardened as he decided, of course. Once he leaves, I will create a mess and leave the city for good. In the Wind Capital, Fujin wasn't the only one who was on alert. There were 4 more people whose expressions were ugly. One of them cursed, "Which bastard is acting so brazenly? How can I do my promotion mission when the Kaze cage is in the city? Shit. I should have left when the samurais and the Suna ninjas had calmed down." A few Konoha Umbu were in the city as well for the promotion mission. However, they all had to stop acting after Fujin killed 10 nobles. Most of them had escaped the city in the week before Fujin made his second move. Only 4 had decided to continue their mission in the city. However, Fujin's actions endangered all of them. Just like Fujin, they decided to maintain a low profile as well. Along with Konoha Umbu, there were dozens of other spies and undercover ninjas operating in the land of wind from every other village. They too cursed the bastard who operated in such a high-profile manner. Raza continued his journey towards the daimyo's estate. Beiki had met up with him mid-route and informed him about the rumors. Raza maintained a smile on his face, however, his mood was gloomy. He was extremely upset with the daimyo. Under everyone's gaze, he entered the daimyo's estate. Fujin sighed, "I really need an inside man. How am I supposed to act when I have no idea what deal is taking place between them?" Of course, Fujin could try to have his clones infiltrate the estate, but it would be very risky. If alerted, the daimyo would know that someone other than Raza is active in the Wind capital city. That would be counterproductive for Fujin and would cause his previous efforts to go to waste. Fujin entered a restaurant and waited for Raza to leave the estate. However, he didn't expect to gain much, though he is younger and probably much more foolish. He is still a cage like that old fox. I doubt I'd see anything from his expression. But, since there are so many people here, one additional guy staring at him shouldn't alarm him. I might as well wait and see. Inside Daimyo's office, Raza and the Wind Daimyo entered an intense debate. Raza was upset at how the daimyo had consistently cut his budget and placed his ninjas under house arrest. Meanwhile, the daimyo was upset at the blatant killings of his nobles. After a couple of hours of intense discussion, both finally reached a consensus. The daimyo said, "All right. For the next 12 months, I won't lower your budget any further. However, you will have to ensure the safety of the nobles in the Wind capital." Raza noticed an opportunity and immediately said, "All right, you can issue missions for protection in Tsunagakuer. I will reserve up to 1,000 ninjas who will be ready to move out on notice." Unlike Konoha, which was suffering from a shortage of manpower, Suna had plenty of spare manpower. Though their total number of ninjas was far lesser than Konoha, the number of missions they received was very less compared to Konoha. So many ninjas didn't have any work to do. Raza wanted to use this opportunity to alleviate some of that problem. However, the daimyo shook his head and said, "No. That won't work. You will have to deploy the ninjas by yourself to ensure their safety. You won't receive any payments for this." Raza frowned. He said, "How can that work? How will I even be able to afford that?" The daimyo replied, "Your budget has sufficient funds to be diverted here. Besides, most people in the city think that Tsunagakuer was behind the recent wave of murders. The nobles all think that you were behind the murders as well. So how can they even be willing to hire Tsunagakuer ninjas for protection? You will have to deploy ninjas in the city without any missions and ensure the safety of all the nobles. In time, they will forget about this event and their trust in Tsunagakuer will increase. If you don't, then don't expect a single mission from the Wind City. And if any more nobles or their families die and you are the suspect, then they will put pressure on me to reduce your budget." Raza's frown kept deepening. He wasn't sure how to respond. After all, both options were bad for Tsunagakuer. One of the old advisors sitting next to him said, "Lord Daimyo, just like you, we also have to answer to public pressure. I understand your point of view, but please also understand our troubles. How about we find a common ground and you pay us an annual fee to deploy our ninjas in the Wind City permanently?" The daimyo thought for a bit and nodded. After haggling for a bit, the old advisor managed to get 1.5 million ryo per month from the daimyo. However, Raza wasn't happy. The amount was in no way even comparable to the amount of money that Tsunagakuwa would have received if the nobles had issued missions. Unfortunately, he had no other choice. He nodded and said, "All right. However, I have another condition. If there are no more incidents, then I want you to increase this amount next year by a huge amount." The daimyo nodded and said, "That is fair. We will renegotiate the terms next year." The two talked for a bit before leaving. The 13 ninjas that were kept under house arrest were allowed to leave with the Kaze cage. However, instead of returning to Suna, Raza stayed in the city. He looked at two sensors and commanded, "Roam around the city in disguises. Check if there are any spies or troublemakers and eliminate them." They nodded and left. The news that the Kaze cage has decided to stay in the city spread like wildfire. Every spy in the city, no matter from which village they were, immediately went into hiding. They employed every means they had to suppress their chakra levels to civilian levels and stayed hidden within the houses. Fujin stayed in his hotel as well. He had no intention to try his luck against Raza. However, he began analyzing, "I made a cage move. Will this make my mission a success? After all, a merchant enforced a cage to make a move." Fujin thought for a bit and realized, no, there are two ways to see this. If I was being tested on my ability to make an impact, then this feat would be a very good one. However, my mission is to create a divide between the Wind Daimyo and the Kaze cage. If this meeting results in their differences being resolved, then my mission would be a failure. Fujin sighed and muttered, "What a mess." He decided, no more undercover missions for me. Though playing the game of chess is fun, I'd much rather just kill all my targets and return to training. Now that I think about it, it's been almost 2 months since I used the elemental training rooms. Hiruzen for sure would suspect that I was the one who kept draining the wind crystals. Oh well. It's not like he can complain. Even if he discovers, he will stay quiet so that I don't begin using them openly and without any restraints. The two sensors Raza brought with him kept roaming in the city for 3 days. Fujin felt chakra fields sensing him several times. In these 3 days, the two sensors found 13 spies and undercover agents. However, they were all from smaller villages. No one from the other major villages was caught by them. The Tsunagakuwa ninjas quickly made a move on them and neutralized them one by one. Their fights caused some property damage to the city. Unfortunately, none of them were wind users. So Tsunagakuwa couldn't pin the blame on them. After 3 days, the two censors met Raza and said, "Apologies, Lord Kazekage. We couldn't sense the culprits who did the assassinations." Raza replied, "It's fine. If they didn't have the confidence to hide, they wouldn't have done something so outrageous in the first place. Anyways, begin preparations to leave. You and Baki will stay back here. I'll send some Umbu to coordinate with you in secret." At that instant, a group of 12 ninjas approached the city. The samurais guarding the city were already on full alert due to the recent events. They immediately noticed them. The group wasn't aware of the recent events in the city and approached the guards. Hayashi Ryota put one hand on the hilt of his sword and said loudly, "Halt." State your name and purpose. The ninjas immediately stopped. One of them said, I am Oda Seiji. I come from Kurogane no Sensen mercenary group. Around a couple of months ago, a squad of our mercenaries was hired to escort a trading group to the city. But since then, we haven't heard anything from them. So we came here to investigate. Chapter 260, Raza's Gaze. The mercenary group from which the real Hiroshi had hired protection had arrived in the Wind capital city to investigate the reason why their comrades didn't return for almost 2 months. Ryota had handled several such cases in the past. In the majority of cases, this was a result of those squads being killed in action. He replied, I see. Can you tell me the names of the ninjas and the traitors? Seiji nodded and informed him of the names of his ninjas. He added, they were tasked to guard a mercenary group led by Takahashi Hiroshi. Ryota nodded and passed the details to a few civilians who used to sit with them. After a while, one person said, Ryota-sama. The ninja names they mentioned haven't arrived here. Seiji heard it and let out a sigh. He had expected this result. Suddenly, another person said, Takahashi Hiroshi and his traitor group had arrived in the city 51 days ago. You were the one who accepted them, Ryota-sama. The mercenary group were surprised to hear this information. Ryota took the document and read it. He said, yeah, I have some memories. This group was very polite. Seiji squinted his eyes and asked, but if our members are missing, how can they have arrived here unharmed? Ryota shrugged and replied, how would I know? Seiji said, we want to meet with Hiroshi and question him. However, Ryota shook his head and said, unfortunately, I can't allow that. Once a trader or a merchant arrives in the city, he is our guest. We cannot allow him to be harassed. Seiji frowned. He withdrew a bag and handed it to Ryota secretly and asked, can we meet up with him now? Ryota took a quick look inside the bag. It had around 100,000 ryo. He smiled and said, sure. How can I deny our esteemed guests? The mercenaries maintained their smile but scoffed internally at his morals. Meanwhile, the other samurais and civilians guarding the gate were joyous. After all, they too would receive a share. Ryota sent a samurai to find and bring Hiroshi to the gate. An hour later, a samurai knocked on the door. Fujin was surprised. He wondered, are they still finding the culprits? He opened the door and politely greeted, hello. How may I help you? The samurai looked at him and said, Hayashi Ryota, the samurai who you met while entering the city wants to meet you. Please come with me. Fujin frowned. He didn't understand what it was about. He asked, why? And why didn't he come here? The samurai said, he is busy and can't leave the city gates. That's why he sent me. As for the reason, you will have to ask him. He began walking. Fujin followed while thinking, what the hell is this about? Did they figure out that I was the culprit? No, that doesn't make sense. A lot more people would show up if they did. Hell, Raza might come himself. Fortunately, the samurai wasn't walking in the direction of where Raza was staying. Though suspicious, Fujin followed thinking, it doesn't matter what he is planning. As long as Raza isn't involved, I'll be able to get away. They arrived at the city gates. Ryota looked at Hiroshi and warmly said, we meet again, Hiroshi. Did you enjoy the city? Fujin nodded and said, yes. I have fallen in love with the city. I can't seem to want to leave it. Haha. But, why did you call me? Ryota pointed at a group of ninjas who were walking towards them and said, "These are from the mercenary group Kurogane no Sensen. They want to ask you about the ninjas who took the mission of protecting you." Ryota looked at Fujin meaningfully. After all, there were no ninjas protecting his group. And he hadn't mentioned them when they arrived. Fujin was surprised. He thought, "I see. They have finally come to investigate. Sign, such bad timing. If they had arrived after Raza left, I would have had so many more options. Looks like this identity can't be used anymore. Though it is probably not a bad thing to leave the city now. Raza and Daimyo should have come to some sort of a deal. So if I make a move now, the Daimyo will lean more towards believing that someone is setting him up." CG approached Fujin and said sternly, "Hiroshi, I am Oda CG from Kurogane no Sensen. Can tell me why your group arrived in the city without the squad assigned to protect you?" Unlike Ryota, CG was much more aggressive. Fujin walked back a couple of steps and showed a fearful expression. Ryota took a step in between them to remind CG that this was the Wind capital city. CG stopped but still stared at Fujin. Fujin answered with a hint of fear in his voice, "On our route, we encountered an injured man. He said that his group was attacked by bandits and asked for our help. The ninjas we hired initially refused the injured man. But the man promised to give them all his profits from the goods that he was going to trade. That made them change their mind. 2 of the ninjas followed the man while the remaining 2 escorted us to the city. However, since we didn't hear from those 2 ninjas again, the other 2 got worried. So after the city was in sight, they left us and went back to look for them. I don't know what happened after that." CG frowned. He analyzed, "Seeing how scared he is, I doubt he is lying. Besides, we are a mercenary organization. People chasing after more money is very common in our line of work. Did they fall into a trap? And why did the remaining 2 chase after them? No, something doesn't add up." He asked, "Where did you find that man?" Fujin replied, "Around 4 days' journey from here." CG replied, "Okay. You will come with us and take us to that place and help us find them." Fujin immediately said, "No. The man was in a very bad state. I don't want to end up like him." CG replied, "You won't. We will be there with you." However, Fujin kept saying no. When CG was about to get aggressive, Fujin said, "This is the Wind capital. You can't forcefully take me from here." CG frowned and looked at Ryota, who looked to be on Fujin's side. He said, "Help me out, brother. I will make sure that he is safe and that you are compensated." Fujin immediately wondered, "Compensated?" Ryota nodded and looked at Fujin and said, "Hiroshi, you don't need to be worried. With 12 ninjas, even I won't be able to do anything to them. So the bandits won't pose a threat to you. In addition, you need to save the ninjas who brought you here safely. Or at the very least, you should get justice for them." Seeing that everyone was against him, Fujin's face became very ugly. He reluctantly nodded, "All right." The samurais and the mercenaries smiled. After all, Hiroshi was just an ordinary trader. How could he disobey them? CG secretly passed another 100,000 ryo to Ryota. Fujin obviously noticed it and decided, in the future, if I decide to steal or plunder, I will definitely start with the Land of Iron. In terms of cash flow, that will definitely be the richest country in this world. This wasn't the first time Fujin had seen an honorable samurai act in this manner. Almost every samurai working for daimyo or in capital cities was very liberal when it came to accepting bribes. In addition, the daimyos also paid them a lot for the protection they provided. In addition, they were also the largest suppliers of basic ninja tools and chakra metal weapons and also mined the last few remaining elemental crystal mines. So a lot of money keeps getting funneled continuously into the land of iron. They were about to leave when suddenly a commotion was heard. The entire group looked back to see the Kazekage walking towards the city gate along with a few Tsunagakura ninjas. Everyone immediately became tense. They quickly moved out of the way and stood on one side of the road respectfully. Raza passed through the gate without paying any attention to them. The mercenary group sighed in relief. However, Raza suddenly stopped and glanced towards the mercenary group and thought, "Weird, why do I get a peculiar feeling from this group?" Raza didn't sense anything from this group. However, he just felt as if